Hey everyone, this is Cam coming at you with more Warhammer Fantasy Talk. I am running a new fantasy league with about 7 players, all in our local tabletop crew. And yeah, I wanted to just give a little bit of a summary as to what this league is going to be about, what kind of armies are going to be running in them, how the kind of narrative and campaign aspects are structured, because this isn't your typical Warhammer battle where you just play the game and calculate victory points afterwards. You'll sustain injuries over the course of this campaign. You will gain experience points, you can level up, and you can do exploration. Anyone that's played Mordheim before might be familiar with some of these mechanics that I'm explaining. A lot of them I basically ported out of Mordheim and tried to figure out how to get them to work in a larger scale Warhammer fantasy battle scenario. Anyways, yep. So just wanted to kind of give everyone a little bit of a summary of how that's going to work. And I will be later on in this video going over the first jam-packed weekend of the league. I believe most of the players all did about at least three battles, if not four. So we have quite a bit of Warhammer to talk about. So, our campaign takes place in the aftermath of a devastating earthquake that has ravaged the old world, and many ancient and long forgotten beasts have emerged from the underground. Same with some mysterious power crystals that are quite intriguing to scholars and alchemists. But, despite all of that, the most important thing is yet to be mentioned. To the east, the waves part, and the greatest titan the world has ever seen emerges, or kaiju if you prefer, Godzilla. And to the west, the greatest dragon to ever rule the skies once again flies, Ghidorah. And some people like Ghidorah, whatever pronunciation you prefer. I've heard it all kinds of different ways. Anyways, yes, this ancient dragon, an ancient dinosaur titan, if you prefer that for Godzilla, rise and are about to march and clash into each other at an epipoint, right in like the heart of the Empire provinces. And cults have begun to form around the rising of these two legendary kaiju. People think that they are the birth of a new god, or it's one that was prophesized of long ago, depending on which faction you're a part of. And basically, these cults are following around in the wake of these mighty kaiju, thinking that when their battle occurs, the world will be rebirthed in their image. And obviously, they want to give all kinds of presents and gain favor for their new god. So that's kind of the idea, is you will be on a team with one of these legendary kaiju, and throughout your battles you're going to find all kinds of little treasures and stuff and various objectives, but the primary ones are these power crystals, and you can use these power crystals during the final battle when your kaijus are duking it out to give them these enhanced moves, kind of similar to the movies. Like, I want Godzilla to do like an atomic breath attack, but it would be a little bit overpowered to just have him doing like that every single turn. So I thought kind of a cool mechanic would be you have to use one of these kaiju like crystals to power them up and trigger their super moves. They're also kind of just awaking from a long slumber, so maybe these aren't their ultimate forms or anything like that, for any like big monster movie guys or anything. Yeah, you could argue I maybe need to buff their stat lines to make them a little better compared to their on-screen cinema appearances. But I think that what I have here is pretty appropriate. I'm gonna keep their stat lines hidden from you all until like the very end. But when I do finally reveal them, you can let me know if I made them too overpowered, or if you're like, Cam, these guys are weak. The on-screen Godzilla would just stomp yours in a heartbeat. So again, you'll have to let me know, but I think I've done a pretty good job with that. And now you got a little bit of a sense of the story. So again, our 7 players, unfortunately a bit of an odd number, are going to be divided up between these two kaiju teams. And we've got Team Godzilla and then Team Ghidorah. Factions that we have playing in our league. We have 2 Wood Elf players, and we have 1 Wood Elf player on each of the teams, so it's kind of interesting balance-wise. we have a Empire player, and this isn't your typical Empire, just like from the Providence ready to go. These are actually more of a down and dirty monster hunter kind of Empire team with a little bit of like the grim dark witch hunter aesthetic kind of tied to them as well. Very cool story and idea for them so far. So yeah, two wood elves. We have an Empire player. I am going to be playing halflings, and I know, folks. What are you doing in like a league tournament type thing here with not an official Games Workshop army? I know it's a Warhammer Armies project made army book. I have played with it a couple of times. The general consensus around the internet is like it's really fun and it's not like the most competitive thing around. I don't know. I didn't really want to be bringing something that's super competitive and going to be like this major wrecking ball in the battlefield. I'm going to be kind of having to run a lot of aspects of the league and all the kind of narrative stuff for like the final battle and everything. So I figured halflings would be a good army to play. They are a lot of fun. They're not super competitive, but they still got a little bit of kick to them. And yeah, I don't know. I'm also on the team that has the additional players, so I think it's a good choice. And for anyone that's like a little bit of a Warhammer purist, I definitely invite you to be a little bit more open minded. With our crew and maybe yours as well, like we've been playing this game like since it came out, and it's been so many years, and no, there's been no new releases. Granted, this might all change in a couple months when the old world comes out, and I really am looking forward to that. But yeah, we're playing with the chips we've been dealt with, and I think incorporating some new ideas that seem like they have been very thoughtfully created, like the halflings, is totally fine. Again, too, I've spent a decent amount of time looking at them balance wise. We aren't running named characters. We typically don't do any of the really high level spell stuff. And just looking at it on that kind of premise alone, I think that they seem pretty well balanced for the game. Anyways, I've gone off on my tangent with halflings. Yeah, I'm playing halflings, folks. Anyways, on the opposite side, we have an orcs and goblins player. However, he's more focused on the orc side of things, which is cool because one of my other opponents that I typically play against plays pretty much just goblins. So this guy's actually playing pretty much just orcs with a heavy focus on black orcs. A very, very elite unit for those who don't know. Black orcs are like your armored up, best of the best kind of warriors for orcs and goblins. Typically, like Grimgor Ironhide is the one that leads the black orcs. He has like a special unit of them. I can't remember. They might be like called the Crimson Immortals or something like that. But they're like an extra elite unit. But he doesn't have any of that stuff. He just has a Black Orc War Boss and then like a 10-15 man unit. So yeah, Orcs and Goblins player. And then the very last one that we have, another cool little curveball, is we have a 6th edition vampire count list being run. Specifically, the von Karstein bloodline in the back of the book. And the reason he's running this is because he wanted to try to do some human kind of corrupted levy units within his undead ranks. So he'll have like a Graveguard unit, maybe a Black Knight unit, and then instead of zombies and skeletons, like kind of just your typical mindless cannon fodder. Not to say these won't be cannon fodder. He'll have living units of like crossbow and archer levies, and maybe like a little free company unit that's again like probably corrupted by the vampire or like been living in the Providence for so long and they're completely under their influence. They have no idea that they're being used as puppets for their dark lords. Anyways, the very final faction that we have is a Lizardman player and or Saurus focus for the army. I'm not 100% sure though. I know he just got a Stegodon, and I could imagine this getting worked into his list further on as we continue through the league. You get more and more points to spend, so easily could see that getting worked in later on. But at the moment, he has quite a bit of hard-hitting melee Saurus infantry units for his army. I'm going to show you the starting list that each of the armies had here, and if they had any like narrative stuff or any additional information that they provided me with, I'll try to include that as well. But I also don't want this video to be 2, 3 hours long. I'm sure it's already going to be pretty long. So what I'm going to do is just go over these very quickly, and if you want to just go ahead and take a little bit more time, feel free to pause on any of the frames here and, just take a personal read if you desire. Starting off with one of our stronger players in the league here, the Mud Dogs, an Empire army. His force has a surprising lack of bodies, you would say, and just units in general, but what it makes up for in lack of numbers, it has in quality. What he did was a bunch of characters for his list. That he's got a witch hunter, he's got a general, and he's got a warrior priest, and each of those is going to contribute something unique to the list. The warrior priest is going to give amazing buffs. The witch hunter is going to kind of select out specific targets and be able to hopefully efficiently take them out of action quickly. It has like a killing blow ability to help accomplish that. I believe it also gets to reroll failed wounds, possibly hits as well. And the last one, and then he's got his general, which basically makes it so Empire troops are rolling like lizard men in their leadership. As in, lizard men have a cold-blooded ability, so they roll 3d6 for making leadership tests, and they take out the highest dice. So basically, all of his Empire guys are going to have that ability, meaning it's going to be hard to break their morale. He's got that unit of Outriders that are going to be able to put out some good damage output, and a couple of the Halberdier unit that's going to host all of his characters is nothing too special, but they are going to prove to be pretty hardy, I think, throughout this league, and something that people are going to underestimate and learn to respect over the course of this opening weekend. Next, we have one of the Wood Elf lists. This is definitely going to be one of the stronger lists, definitely one of the more competitive lists, I would say, that's here. The Wild Riders are a very strong unit, same with the Deep Wood Scouts, and yeah, definitely looking like a strong opponent. Next, we have the Orcs and Goblins list, and as I said, we are focusing more on the Orcs with this list, although he does have that Goblin Chariot. And yeah, that elite unit of Black Orcs that will definitely be an intimidating presence on the board, at least I assume. This is the other Wood Elves player list, and I know I said that a lot of us have been playing this game for a long time, but there's actually a new player that we have amongst our tabletop crew that was interested in Warhammer Fantasy, picking the game up really quick, but a little bit more limited in terms of what they have available for their roster, but even that has been expanding very quickly, and as you can tell, our tournament's kind of set in this lower 500 point area, and it'll be increasing quickly. By the end of it, we'll probably be walking around with 1,500, maybe 16, 1,800 points if you're doing really good. So yeah, basically this, I think it's a good opportunity for a player like this to pick up some more tactics of the game, get to know the units that you already have, and all that jazz. But just wanted to mention that they're a bit of a newer player is all. Moving on to the Lizard Man list. Not actually a newer player, but someone that stepped into the Warhammer, Mordheim kind of scene with us. I want to say like a year, maybe like a year and a half ago, roughly. Started as a Star Wars Legion player, and then kind of integrated into the world of Warhammer Fantasy, and never looked back. Not to say we don't play Star Wars Legion still, but everyone's been really excited with like the old world and just playing 8th edition and all that, so kind of just been our focus as of late. Anyways, this is his Lizard Man list. Pretty strong looking list, and I like the Salamander. It's a good addition, I think. Moving on to the Von Karstein Vampire list here. As you can see, he's got some human levies mixed in with that Graveguard and a nice looking vampire to lead the force. Very cool army. If you're someone who's been watching any of my videos on the channel, you know I love my 6th edition Blood Dragon list, which actually ended up being a little bit stronger than I might have sold it initially, and I apologize if I undersold it as like a really fun army. I still think it's fun and all that, but it just ended up being a little bit more competitive than I thought it was going to be. Anyways, this might not be the case with the von Karstein list, unfortunately. Running this list in 8th edition, he's been finding victory throughout the league, but I'm not 100% sure. His morale's kind of been wavering on this list, so we'll have to see if he ends up sticking with it throughout the remaining games that we have. But anyways, yeah, we've got a nice little corrupted undead list here for the von Karsteins. And don't worry, we're not coming up short on the list here. The halflings have arrived, the knights of the Waffle House, played by yours truly. And that just about wraps up the list for our Warhammer Fantasy Kaiju League. Now I just want to go over how all of the mechanics work for our league. Basically explain how these armies are starting out, what happens to them after each of the games that they participate in, like the in-between. And yeah, how they will evolve, be scored, and you will ultimately be placed when the time comes for the final game. So there are a few additional phases that you will be participating in after each basically standard Warhammer Fantasy battle you participate in. There is an injury phase, there is an level up XP phase, there's an exploration phase, excuse me, and then there's a purchase phase. And again, people who played Mordheim, you'll kind of see a lot of similarities here. Additionally, after each of the battles that you participate in, you are supposed to have a nice gentlemanly conversation with your opponent about who you think their MVP was. And you got to try to be as unbiased as you can about it. You know, just discuss with them how the game played out and what you felt like their most effective unit or character was. And your opponent's going to do the same thing. Whatever units those are, get 1 additional XP point, and every other unit that didn't get completely dismantled during the battle will also receive 1 XP point. The way you do injuries, again, this is similar to Mordheim, is each of your models that are not characters will roll on the unit injury chart, and then your characters roll on the character injury chart. Units are very simple. You roll a d6 for each unit lost, or like each mini in the unit lost. And on a 1, unfortunately, they died. And you can choose to replace them, or you can choose to continue on with your unit. If it falls below the minimum unit requirement size, like if it's 5 and you are down to like 2 or 3 men, you don't feel like replacing them or you can't afford it, unfortunately, your unit will disband and you need to get a new unit, basically. So that's kind of how the injuries work for units. Characters are a little bit more involved, and again, it's just like Mordheim. There's basically a D66 chart that is very similar to Mordheim. I added like 1 or 2 extra things because it's such a fun chart, and I don't know, it always gets my creativity juices flowing, and I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if Mordheim had like the ability to lose a leg and this and that, and a couple of other ones that we added. But it's essentially the same injury chart, and your characters will be rolling on that. And again, I had to do a little bit of rules translation to make sure everything lined up with larger scale Warhammer Fantasy. But yeah, it's pretty much the same injury chart. And hopefully your characters don't die or sustain serious injuries. Sometimes injuries can stack, like if you lose an arm and then you lose another arm, you become a stub and then you can't really fight anymore. So that'll be a retirement as well. There are other ways to lose your characters other than just straight up dying on the injury chart. So that is the injury phase, and then the XP phase, again, is going to be a little similar to Mordheim, but we do have a bit more of an involved system here. Well, maybe not involved, different's a better word. So there are 5 brackets for XP, and there's a unit XP chart and a character XP chart, similar to how the injuries work. So again, after every battle, you'll get 1 XP on your unit, and then, like the MVP, will get 1 extra. You will have 5 different brackets of XP level ups you can do. Level 1, level 2, level 3, etc. The level ups, the higher up they go, the juicier they get. For example, some of the level 5 level ups are your unit gets like +1 toughness, or your unit gets +1 attack. And you can probably see how, unless your unit's getting MVP all the time, it's going to be at least 3 or 4 uh, battles before you get something like that for your unit. Additionally, almost all these level ups, you can only get them once over the course of the whole campaign, so it's not like your unit's going to be getting +2 toughness. It's only going to probably get +1. And these charts are random as well. That +1 toughness is accompanied by a like +1 attack level up and a +1 strength level up. I don't have the exact chart in front of me. I'm just kind of giving examples here. So you can't necessarily just go in expecting to get that. It does have that Mordheim aspect of like you kind of get the level up you get based on the chart roll. But there is that sense of scale that if I'm spending 5 XP on a level up, I'm getting something really good. 1 XP are kind of your baseline level ups, oh, you get to re-roll a failed leadership, or your unit is no longer affected by fear. Things like that, kind of. Anyways, that's most of the rules in regards to XP. It can get a little bit complicated when you have a really long campaign, I will say. We did one earlier in the year and definitely had some pretty beefy XP units in that one, and it can get easy to forget all of your additional rules. But I really like it as a system because I don't think too many of the level up combinations break units per se. It just gives you like a chance to be like, wow, wouldn't it be so cool if I had like this one unit that had heavy armor instead of light armor? And that's possible. It's called all ironcladded, I believe, on our level up chart, and it increases the armor save of the unit by 1. It maxes out at a 3 up or a 2 up, but anyways, yeah, I think it's a really fun mechanic that allows you to kind of get some new creative opportunities for your already existing units. It presents cool hobby opportunities for you. Again, like that ironclad upgrade. It's like, oh, like maybe I'll add a couple of extra little bits to my unit of like shoulder pads or something to represent that like they're so heavily armored now. And you don't have to worry about that kind of breaking the game when you just play a standard game. People will know what that unit is, and I don't think like adding a couple shoulder pads or anything is going to ruin anything. And if anything, it gives you like a really cool story to tell about your unit and this epic league that they participated in and all the battles and stories that they can share. So, yeah, really a big fan of that mechanic. After you've completed all of your level ups, or you can also choose, by the way, to save your XP. That's obviously kind of how you'll get up to 5 XP on a unit, and you can spend on the max XP chart. Anyways, after you've done all of your XP shenanigans, you will have the opportunity to explore a point of interest in the old world of Warhammer. And this can range from all kinds of things. You can visit a go into a cave and encounter a monster inside of there and fight the monster, and if you succeed you'll be able to loot the treasure afterwards. And the way you do that is normally by making like a weapon skill test, and if you pass it you kill the monster. If you fail it, your character either, I don't know, makes a roll on the injury table, or will have to miss the next battle due to his confrontation with this monster. Again, I don't have it right in front of me, so I'm not sure what the exact injury results or failure results are for that event specifically. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. You can visit the watchtower, and some of the patrolling military forces will give you some information on the upcoming events, which means a couple of your units can get Vanguard. So there's all kinds of little events and things that can happen during your exploration phase. And as I already mentioned with the cave, some of them have some risk involved with them. So yeah, very similar to Mordheim, as I know I keep parroting over and over again. But we love Mordheim, and I just thought it would be really cool to have those mechanics translated over to large-scale Warhammer. And it also is really fun when you start at these smaller points and get really attached to your characters and watch their narrative kind of evolve as your army grows. The final thing you do before you participate in your next league battle is purchases, and this is basically a one for one. Whatever amount of crowns you have in your coffers is how many points you have to spend. you don't have to spend them all. You might not want to. Say you want like some cool new chimera or dragon and it costs like 200, 300, points. Probably aren't going to get that after one income. So if you want something like that, you'll either have to make small amounts of purchases and slowly build up your coffers, or you'll have to just skimp out entirely for like a couple battles and hope you get good exploration and all that stuff and not many injuries. You get what I'm saying? Anyways, yeah, so the only kind of stipulation that we have with this is you can make purchases just like you would in a standard game for a list, but you have to maintain your percentages. So what that means is, starting out at 500 points, you need to have 125 points of core. We use all the standard percentages from the 8th edition rulebook. We don't use any of the changed ones in Storms of Magic. Anyways, yeah, so you need like 25% core, and that means the 125 guys and the 500 points are there. And when you get another 100 crowns and you go up to 600, I don't have a calculator in front of me, but I believe that's another 25 crown added to 125. So you would then need 150 core in order to maintain your legal list integrity in that situation. And the same thing goes to heroes and lords. You might want to kit your character out at the start, but again, you're limited to 25% for your heroes. So that's 125 points that you're able to spend there. And when you get up to 600, if you do spend that much, then you can spend another 25 on your character. Or you can, I don't know, if you're a goblin player, maybe you can squeeze in another character with those points instead. So, yeah, a lot of options for how you're going to build up your list, but you still need to maintain that standard structure that's expected in a Warhammer fantasy game, and a lot of us are kind of a fan of. So, that's about it when it comes to all of the additional campaign mechanics that are kind of tacked on to the league. And I think a lot of them are really cool. And if you, again, it's hopefully my last time saying this, but if you play Mordheim and you're a fan of that game, I think you'll understand why we kind of added all this stuff in. And it really does kind of juice up the narrative aspect of playing Games Workshop games, and specifically like Warhammer games. So, I think I am finally done going over the structure and lists and all the players for our exciting Kaiju League. What happened over this weekend? Well, I only have footage of one of the particular battles, so I'll have to kind of give a summary of a little bit of this. I'm going to put a chart up just so everyone can keep track. But basically, you will be playing in 2 standard battles and then 1 mega battle. The standard battles are you being paired up or finding an opponent from the opposing faction, the Team Ghidorah team versus the Team Godzilla team. So we have 4 players on our side, they have 3 players on the other side, which means you will, if you're on Team Godzilla, have to play against 2 of their players and vice versa. Obviously, we do have 1 extra player on our team due to the fact that we just had an odd number. What we decided to do about this was either I will just try to be very unbiased, or one of our players from our team will try to be unbiased and play in a 2v2 game, and any of the rewards like the kaiju crystals or anything like that that are gathered for the team that we're playing on, it'll go to their team instead of ours. I think that's more than fair. And it's not like we want to just throw these games, even though we're playing on the opposing team, because those injuries are still going to affect our armies, and we still want to have a healthy army, like all that stuff. So I think that's a fair enough compromise, but for the most part, again, it's going to be you doing 2 games. Each one is a 1v1 match against someone from the opposing faction. And then after that, the mega battles are basically a gathering of all the players in the league in one big battle, and the points are balanced out again. We give the side that's down 1 player. We basically add up all the points, and whatever the difference is, they get that many extra points of reinforcements. So it's an even game. But yeah, all the forces of the Godzilla cult allied together on one side of the table and Team Ghidorah on the other side of the table. So not only am I kind of running and structuring this event, but I'm also playing in it. So that's kind of the reason I don't have a ton of photographs or footage of the first two standard battles I played in, or a lot of the other ones that the league was in. But again, I'm just going to use that chart to give you all a gauge of how perhaps your favorite army so far is doing. The Mega Battle, on the other hand, I have everything I need to do a proper battle report on, folks. So I know it's taken a little while, but we finally arrived at that point. Enjoy the Mega Battle report. So this is what my halflings are looking like prior to engaging in this mega battle. As I already mentioned, I had participated in two standard battles before this, and if you saw in the little chart there, I managed to get a victory in each of them. Surprising for these little halflings, I think. But anyways, what that means is I had some extra crowns to spend, or points. I believe my army total was around 700, 730-ish. So you're looking at an additional 200 points, roughly, from what I had in the original posted list. What did I spend my points on? Well, I bought a unit of Vigilante Guard. It's basically a halfling unit that has one increased weapon skill. They can take a light armor and bit better gear. They can also take a 25-point magic banner. I was a little hesitant towards this unit at first, and avoided it in my first couple of games, but I need to get my core percentage up going forward in the league, and I figured this would be an okay unit to spend a couple extra points on, so. Additionally, you can see some dice next to all of my units there. This is a unique mechanic for the Halfling army. Basically, they have themselves a little snack before the battle. Their little Halfling tummies were rumbling. And what you do is you roll a die on the chart to see what kind of meal they had beforehand. So, just looking at what I got here, most of the two to threes are a reroll on failed leadership tests. I believe it's like buttermilk and biscuits. A one is stale rations. So it looks like my archers and my new unit of vigilante guards are unfortunately getting the stale rations today. I believe brandy and bacon strips is 5 to 4, which is typically the best result you can get. That'll give you +1 strength to your profile. And halflings generally are strength 2, sometimes strength 3, so that's a really nice buff to get. And 6 is an amazing one, I think, in most halfling armies, but not really the one I'm running, unfortunately. And I did get it on a unit that's irrelevant. My leader rolled the 6 result, which is like oxtail soup or something along those lines, and it gives him stubborn. And while that's awesome to have as a rule, he's in a unit that already has stubborn, so kind of redundant, but the unit that he's in, the actual pantry guard, and I believe the chef as well, they got the +1 strength. So they're strength 3 or 4, and then with great swords, they're going to be going up to 6, and then they have that honeycomb banner. So probably strength 7 on that unit, and that's actually pretty scary. So now that I've gone over my army, let's get to the actual mega battle here. What are we looking at? About 2,500 points on each side, I believe. And we have a mini kaiju added to our forces. Hopefully, I don't do a terrible job enunciating his name, but on our side, that is not a normal Bastillodon. That is Anguirus, one of the allies of Godzilla in the older movies. On the opposing side, it's kind of hard to see in this photo, but he will be revealed soon. They have what appears to be a normal giant, but this is no ordinary giant. It was constructed by a mad scientist. The creature of Frankenstein has reached ludicrous proportions and is now ready and able to fight in a kaiju battle. I don't think this one, the Frankenstein monster actually fought against Godzilla in the movies back in the day, but he was in like some of the other movies that Godzilla's monsters were in. So I figured why not throw him in here? And he's kind of a goofball. It'll be fun to have. So we've got Anguirus versus Frankenstein's monster participating in this mega battle. Other than that, I'd like to go over a bit of the terrain and notable things that kind of happened in deployment here. So the key things with the deployment are we have our Empire player and a bit of our Lizardmen player focused on the left and center side of the board. Primarily the Empire player on the far left and Lizardmen player kind of in the center. On the further right side of the board, kind of the far side in the pictures, is where my halflings are going to be located and our wood elf player. Opposing us is the enemy wood elf player focused on the opposite side of me, the far left closest side in the picture. The orcs and goblins are going to be spread out towards my side of the board, and I would say the undead are kind of stretched out. They're in the middle. They have a unit of knights on the far side, and they also have like their main graveguard unit on my side. So they're a little bit more spread out. We had a little bit of vanguard shenanigans going back and forth. I can't actually conclude from the pictures here whether or not those Deepwood scouts were put there. I believe he actually vanguard decided not to vanguard at all and put them in the woods, that those pink woods that are on their side of the board there. So yeah, a little bit back and forth, mind games, I guess, going on over there. Really, there weren't too many vanguard maneuvers. The Wild Riders were also debating on doing a vanguard maneuver. However, I think they were too tempted to get a first turn charge on the opposing Outriders, so they decided not to. So really not too much craziness going on before the first turn dies are actually rolled. Our kaiju are facing off against each other in the center areas of the board. Theirs is by the little pink woods that I mentioned. You can actually like see the road kind of winding in towards that area. It's positioned over there. There's also like a little chapel that it's near, and our kaiju is in the middle of the lizard man and wood elf line, kind of staring directly at theirs. And again, I kind of mentioned in that little text thing there, but they will have to go right towards each other for a legendary kaiju brawl. After the fight is concluded, you're allowed to kind of do whatever you want with them, but for the most part, they have to head towards each other and they'll just stomp any unit that gets in their way with devastating attacks. So on the first turn, most people are out of range of major charges. I do believe the Outriders move forward, get a couple of shots off, and might get charged by one of the Wild Rider units on the first turn. But aside from that, no major combats. There will be a lot of shooting exchanged at each other. From both sides, Wood Elf players, casualties will be inflicted. Our Wood Elf player on the Godzilla side kind of focused down the Orcs and Goblin player on the first turn, at least from what I recall. And their opposing Wood Elf player focused down the Empire player on the opposite side of the battlefield. The main lines are just going to be moving straight forward towards each other. We've got the Wood Elves and the Lizardmen supporting our Kaiju, and they're heading towards that little pot of stew in the center of the battlefield. Kind of hard to see because I'm on the farthest side of the battlefield here, but my halflings are being a little reserved at the moment. There's a big, mean orc battle line kind of facing off against them, and we've got short bows. So, what I'm doing is sending my scrappy little short bow guys forward to kind of harass and engage the orc line, and the pantry guard are sitting comfy on the high ground behind a defensive fence, waiting for the orcs to be agitated enough and get drawn into their lines. At least that's what I'm hoping for. Additionally, I believe turn one, I had a misfire on the hot pot. This has become something of a tradition with these halflings. I think the crew that is manning the hot pot is just eating all the stew or whatever leftovers they're putting in there. And it seems like consistently on the very first shot that they have to make, they're always just shooting a blank or there's just some kind of shenanigans going on. And it's resulting in a goddamn misfire. So, yeah, my halfling hot pot for like the third game in a row will be unable to shoot. So, hopefully, they'll get that sorted out next turn or the turn after. Other than that, turn one's pretty much concluded. Additionally, I believe the undead player on the opposing side had a miscast during their turn. They just bought a new necromancer, I believe, and yeah, miscast into stupidity, as I like to call it. They basically forgot all of their spells and just became absolutely useless presence on the battlefield. Not the end of the world though for the vampire player, because he also has a actual vampire in his unit that can cast invocation. This was his second caster that he added to the list, so yeah, still some magic capability, but that was definitely a bit of bad luck. However, moving on to turn two, we will be getting a taste of the same thing as our skink priest has a terrible bit of luck, also rolls a miscast, and also becomes stupid and forgets all of his spells. Ugh, yeah, so kind of rough magic phases for both sides starting out here. Unfortunately for our Empire player, his Outriders are going to get caught by the opposing Wild Riders in a charge. The Outriders managed to gun down a couple of them before they make it into contact, but unfortunately the Wild Riders just have a really good profile. I don't think they're going to be able to manage even against two of them there. So, dire situations for the Empire on the far flank, it would seem. However, things aren't looking terrible for our side, at least on turn two here. My halflings have been engaging against the orc line. His black orc line is kind of tied up against my archers, who are going to get insane courage during that combat and keep them tied up for an additional turn. Some fanatics get flung out at inopportune times as well for the orcs and goblins, and our general combined shooting of the wood elves and the halflings is really taking some casualties on them. His Black Orc unit, I think, is reduced to half at this point, and he had a supporting unit of Goblin archers behind them, and they are also whittled down to about half their numbers. The Graveguard are moving up to support that battle, though, and we have not really been able to get damage in on them yet. Additionally, you can see the stew pot is really starting to divide up our troops. We wanted to have our kaiju charge into theirs, but unfortunately, there wasn't enough space. There's a unit of biggin orcs, basically, that are denying our capability of making contact for the charge. So what'll happen is our kaiju will basically just go into the unit of biggins and try to charge their giant as soon as possible. The idea of these kaiju is they're so large and just kind of unpreoccupied with the smaller scale folk that you aren't actually locked into combat with them. However, what's going to happen to the biggins is they're also going to get charged by a unit of Saurus warriors, or sorry, Temple Guard actually, and that will keep them tied up in combat for a little bit. Additionally, it's just not going to be a good combat in general for him. The kaiju do a lot of damage to little units like that, and the Temple Guard just have a good profile in general. They are going to flee and get a lucky roll on the flee dice. The Temple Guard will not catch them, and as I've already mentioned, the kaiju are only preoccupied with fighting each other at the moment, so he will not bother pursuing them at all. So our kaiju is basically just going to turn around, face theirs, and the Temple Guard are only going to move forward a couple inches, trying to chase down the biggins. And that'll be about it. During this photograph here, I can tell just by this little sliver that this is when we took our little burrito food break during the mega battle. So I'm going to use this time just to cover a couple of things that I might have missed during basically the first half of this mega battle. They took a couple of Goblin Doom Divers as their makeup points because we had an extra player that's like, an extra 500, 600, maybe 700 points in difference. So they got units that they could basically they spent those points on all kinds of different units, and one of the things that they bought were doom divers. They got the knights, and I think they bought like a couple extra archers or something like that. But anyways, these doom divers have been shooting at us every single turn, specifically at our wood elf player's archer unit, and pretty much consistently they just kill one, maybe two elf archers every single turn. It's kind of hilarious. um he rolls a direct hit every single turn. He's got like the best luck possible when it comes to actually landing the shot. Granted, the Doom Divers do have a bit of an autocorrect feature when you scatter off, but like he doesn't even need that. He's just rolling direct hit after direct hit after direct hit. But it doesn't matter because all he's picking off is one or two elves max. So, I mean, after a while, it is going to add up. But yeah, it's kind of a laughing point between all of us during this mega battle, and I wanted to mention that two Doom Divers just shooting at one archer unit, consistently picking off maybe one to two archers maximum. Hilarious. Additionally, we have a unit of Treekin that managed to get a rear charge on their kaiju monster. They're kind of just tying him up, distracting him, but they are going to have a chariot and a unit of Graveguard that's on the far side come into the flank of the Treekin. So everyone's getting flanked or rear charged here. It's devastating and it's a big, messy combat. Ultimately, it's not going to end too well for the Treekin, but I wanted to make a note of that as well because the combat is kind of already initiated at this point in the battle, and it's going to kind of conclude over the next turn. The final thing to make a note of is our kaiju spent the first power crystal to use one of his super moves. Most of these super moves are just moves that our big monsters are going to have at the very end. And basically, what I'm going to do is give the monsters a sprinkling of those move sets over the course of each mega battle. So each of these monsters has one of the moves that their big one's going to have at the very end. They're going to have like 4 or 5. So my thought process is this will kind of let players get introduced to all the kaiju super moves that they're going to have available to them at the end of the game and play around with them a little bit and learn their mechanics. So again, we're using the first one here. It is a not really an atomic breath because obviously our monster doesn't actually have access to that. It's a bit of a watered down like power beam ability. And what it does is it shoots in a straight line from where our kaiju is, and it has to go directly into the other kaiju, and it'll go through him, and it'll hit any units along the way, friend or foe. They will get hit with a strength 6 hit, and you need to pass an initiative test in order to survive. Or if you have any other kind of save that could be applicable against a strength 6 attack. Additionally, it does only deal 1 wound, so if you have multiple wounds, it won't really do too much. If it does hit the enemy kaiju, though, it does, I believe, D3 multiple wounds instead of just a single one. So again, we decided to use that. And the way it works is you have to declare it at the start of your turn, and it doesn't actually go off until the start of your following turn. So, my thought process with that is you'll get a turn of maneuvering with your troops to try to avoid the atomic breath attack, basically, that straight line that it's going to do. And if you're unable to do so, you'll still get an initiative test to try and dodge it at the very last second. And a lot of the abilities kind of work like this in terms of what the players can do to try to avoid the damage output of them. But if you are unable to do so, they will be quite devastating. Or so I think they will, because we let loose our, I shouldn't say atomic breath, we let loose our power beam attack on the enemy. And guess what? Their kaiju dodges it. The Graveguard unit that's along the path and is probably the prime target for this dodges every single one with an amazing initiative roll. I think a couple of Black Orcs were along the path as well. They managed to dodge it. A chariot manages to dodge it. I know I'm getting ridiculous here, but like seriously, this is so many initiative tests. The only thing that fails the initiative test is about 5 or 6 goblins in the way, way back. That unit I mentioned was getting chipped down by archers. That is literally the only unit that failed the initiative test and actually gets hit by this devastating power beam attack. I couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. And kind of a waste of our power crystal, if I'm being honest. Now we're tied in terms of score between the teams. Additionally, after all the dirty business between the Biggins and the Temple Guard is concluded, both the kaiju are in a free path to charge at each other. And they do so. I believe ours deals about 1 or 2 wounds in the initial melee. And as I already mentioned, theirs was able to dodge our power beam attack. So what happens to us? Well, they have a couple of options with what they can do with Frankenstein here. He kind of works like a normal giant in the sense that you can roll on his chart, but he has a nice little rule where you can choose to re-roll the result if you do not like it. However, you have to stick with the second result. Or you can use his standard profile to just attack the monster. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think he has like 5 or 6 strength 6 attacks. Definitely nothing bad at all. They decide to take a gamble though, and they say, you know what, we're going to roll on the chart. I am not an Orcs and Goblin player. However, and I also wasn't really part of this combat. This was between the team captains on both sides, really. I believe what they roll is a headbutt result with their giant. And basically, to describe it in terms of a movie, Frankenstein the monster charges in. Angus does like a tail swipe and a little bit of like his shield's like spikiness. He gets a bit of that into Frankenstein during the initial blow exchange, dealing a couple of wounds. And then Frankenstein proceeds to just get a clear headbutt attack right on Angus's head, like direct hit. It doesn't hit the shell or anything, and I think his skull just cracks right then and there, folks. I hate to say it. I know all these monsters probably have their own little fan groups and everything, but yeah, the headbutt's successful. I don't exactly know how the rule works, but they were just telling me that they didn't even need the powered up stat line basically for this monster, which they had. They didn't have like a normal giant stat line. In addition to re-rolling his chart, he had like toughness 6 or 7. He had like he had at least 6 wounds. Like this was a buffed up giant. They told me based on the way they rolled on this random chart, they didn't need any of that, and they just straight up killed our kaiju. Unbelievable. Best I've ever seen a giant do in my entire life. Also, if you can't tell, the Biggins managed to rally, win combat against the Temple Guard. I believe they did have a little bit of support from a nearby chariot, but yeah, that turned around really quick. The Temple Guard fled away, and what will happen is a nearby Eternal Guard unit will have their hero that's lodged in the unit charge out of the unit, catch the Temple Guard, and finish them off. So yeah, I gotta be honest. The first half of this game was looking okay for us, but with the Kaiju brawl going on their side, the Temple Guard kind of nearby crumbling to the Orcs and Goblin force, even the Treekin getting caught up by the Grave Guard, it's not looking hot. And the Empire's been struggling against all the skirmishing tactics of the Wood Elves on the far side. But the only thing we really got going for us is the halflings versus the orcs and goblins on the opposite side of the battlefield. As you can see from the picture here, I got some notable things to be told about this little battle that was exchanged between the black orcs and my halflings. So basically, his unit of Black Orcs charged forward at my initial, like, kind of skirmishing unit of archers. And as I mentioned, they got insane courage and were able to hold for one extra turn. While they were holding, my other halfling unit decided to tuck themselves in on the little corner of the board, as you can see in the picture there, and just try to be as annoying as possible. Pantry Guard, as you can see, got the high ground. Those little crates and stuff are counting as a fence line, and basically they got a little defensive edge, the high ground, and they were just sitting there waiting for the Black Orcs to charge. My leader in the unit there also has an item called like the Applewood Bow, so he's taking range shots at them, and I got the hot pot behind him. We are just trying to do as much damage as we can before the clash happens. And so it does happen. Unfortunately, I don't have any photos of before. I only have the after photo. So what happens is he's got about 6, maybe 7 Black Orcs remaining at this point, and his hero that's leading the unit, Black Orc War Boss, or a chieftain. It's the hero version. Apologies on that, but yeah, they managed to make the charge in, and the hero challenges me to a duel. I decide to accept this duel with my master chef. My thought process is he's got -2 to hit me because of the fence and the fact that I'm a halfling. So chances are he could just whiff those attacks. My master chef can potentially kill his character. He gets like 2 strength 7 swings, and with his herbs and spices he gave to the unit, he gets to reroll misses. So I think I have a chance there, and even if he gets killed, it's not the end of the world. I can kind of keep those attacks off my unit, which is a bit on the slim side, and I can probably finish off the Black Orcs. And that's pretty much what happens. His boss does manage to kill my chef, and he was quite happy about that. It was a morale boost for the orcs. But I will say, after his boss was done chuckling about the duel, he looked around and all of his boys were chopped down by the pantry guard. And that was definitely a failed combat resolution. For whatever reason, the pantry guard are unable to catch the black orcs on the pursuit. The war boss manages to escape all by his lonesome. But yeah, and he also managed to survive a volley of shooting afterwards out of spite. But yeah, that's really the only thing that our side had going for us, I would say, at this point in the battle. There are a few other notable things that do occur, though. The Wood Elves have a unit of Eternal Guards that have kind of punched through the main line. They're going to get charged by three different units: Halberdiers on one flank, my Vigilante Guards on the other, and a unit of like 4 or 5 Dryads that are still left charging him on the front. So that could go well for us. The Graveguard are now clashing with the Elven Archers inside the woods, the Poisonous Woods. Good damage is actually exchanged between both sides. They kill a lot of the Archers, but the Archers got their stand and shoot, took a couple of volleys at them, had dangerous terrain, a lot of little things working for them. They're elves, so they get always strikes first, reroll their misses. So a lot of casualties actually kind of inflicted on both sides there, but ultimately, my side on the far kind of area it's a bit of a loss. Other than the halflings still holding at the top, the elves are kind of crumbling. The lizard men are almost all killed at this point. I think he's got a couple of guys still left, but yeah, the salamander got plucked off at this stage by elven shooting attacks from the opposing side, and the Empire player is still kind of holding strong. His main unit's still there, but they're surrounded and they're getting chased around by skirmishing tactics, and they're kind of unable to capitalize on much at this point. I think the Black Knight unit that they had is also fighting them. The Wild Riders that the Elf player had fighting with the Outriders is circling around. Both of the Outrider units are circling around, and they are going to contribute to that triple combat that the Eternal Guard are stuck in at the very end stage of this game. And that'll be kind of the final thing to talk about. The three units charging in on the Eternal Guard are unable to win the combat. The Dryads are all killed before they have a chance to swing. I lose a couple of Halflings, but I believe I'm steadfast, or I actually might break his steadfast because of the flank charge. And the Halberdiers get a couple of kills. I think I do get a wound or two, but yeah, not really able to break that Eternal Guard unit. And then the Wild Riders kind of come in, charge the flank, and finish off the Vigilante Guards and the Halberdiers. And that is pretty much the end of the game there, calling it on turn 5 for the Mega Battle. Afterwards, I calculated all the victory points for both of the sides, and it was a decisive victory for Team Ghidorah. They had about 300 points remaining over us after all of the points were calculated. So, just to give a perspective there, I think we had about like 14, maybe 1,200 points remaining, and they had about 15, 1,600 points remaining on the battlefield. So, we killed about half of each other's forces by the end of it. I definitely had the majority left for our side, and on the opposing side, the enemy Wood Elf player had the majority of points left for them. But having said that, he definitely took some casualties. He lost some Wild Riders and expensive units. I know I lost one of my whole units of archers. I also lost that whole unit of vigilantes near the end. So it's not like either of us made it out unscathed. And yeah, in terms of the objective, that just solidified their lead even further. Their kaiju was able to defeat ours in a one-on-one duel and live to tell the tale afterwards, giving them a hefty chunk of additional victory points for the objective. So again, clear victory for Team Ghidorah in the first mega battle of the league. And for anyone else curious about our additional little campaign mechanics that go into this, I had to take a couple of rolls on the injury charts. As I mentioned, I lost 2 units. Not too bad, though. I think I lost about 2 or 3 of my archers and 1 or 2 of the vigilante guard. Ultimately, my losses came out to about 30, 40 crowns to replace all of the dead, and I do believe we do that. My MVP was the Pantry Guard, which makes a lot of sense. They managed to cleave down that Black Orc unit and definitely give a little bit of a morale boost for our side, even though it was a bit of a decisive loss. What are you going to do, though? Sometimes these mega battles can be a bit one-sided. I don't really think this one was, though. I think we definitely had the advantage in the first half of the game, and just the kaiju battle and a couple of the key battles that were happening in tandem with that during the halfway point of the game all kind of seemed to go for the other side, and that's just really when the momentum kind of swapped for them.
And it's a dice game as well, and that's bound to happen. We get good luck at some point, then they're going to get some good luck at some point. So maybe it was a bit of that, maybe it was tactics, not really sure, but it was a really fun first mega battle. Took a couple of hours to get through it all, and was a good opening experience for some of our players that had never participated in one of our league events before. So a lot of fun, and I will be working on a couple of other videos relating to the league. I got my next match already in and want to do a battle report on that. And I want to do a little bit of hobby talk with this halfling army. So stay tuned for all that and have a great rest of the day. Look forward to talking to you all again soon. Bye bye.